Alright, so welcome back to another review, well, comparison. This time we've got the new Arya V3s, also known as the Stealth Magnet revisions, up against its predecessor, the V2s, alleged V2s, because HiFiMAN never really confirmed or denied it, but we know the truth. V2s. So if you recall from previous videos, I mentioned I like the Arya V2, but its treble is it's a bit too intense for my tastes, and I personally prefer a headphone with a bit more mid-presence. But I kept it around because I really enjoyed its synergy with the IFI Signature DAC amp, the amazing things it did with the sub bass. Just it transformed the V2 into a really enjoyable and exciting headphone, and just had great synergy with it, honestly. So, does the V3 fix the V2's issues while retaining that fantastic bass characteristic? Let's find out now. So we're gonna glaze over the content, build quality, and comfort aspect of things here, because there really not a lot has changed. So as for the contents, nothing's changed here. You get the same exact things you originally received with the V2. Really, there's no change other than the box's slightly updated design. It has a Stealth Magnet sticker on it, that's it. Now as for the build quality, I really don't think anything was updated. There are minor updates, it's not the exact same headphone. The only visual differences you'll see are on the cups themselves, and this may help you if you're trying to figure out which is which in person. Let's take a closer look here. So first thing right off the bat, the grills are a little different, and you can definitely see that on camera there. As you can see there, it's a little more rounded out on the V3, it protrudes a little more than on the V2. And if you run your finger across it, the V2 barely feels like a hump or anything at all, whereas the V3 is very, very noticeable. Also, the V3's bars on the grill are sharper and more square than on the V2, which feels smoother and nicer to the touch. Now, it's not like you're going to cut yourself here, but you can definitely see there's a difference in thickness there, and you can definitely feel it when you run your finger across it like this. Next, you'll want to shine a light on the drivers themselves. So as you can see, the V3's drivers are slightly skewed from the grill's bars, where on the V2, you'll see they're completely parallel. Here, I'll try to shine the light as best I can on it, but honestly, the camera's just not picking that up very well. So it's just a minor difference, but it's a dead giveaway if you shine these under a light. Last little thing, if you see this magnet on the top right-hand side of the right cup, you'll notice the V3 has 3 rings on it, while the V2 has a ring and a dot in the center of it. Now, I will mention this tiny little detail about the V3. I bought them open box from HiFiMAN's website, and right out of the box there was a slight squeak coming from the left-hand side. It was a bit annoying, but it went away after a couple of hours worth of use. Since then, the squeak is completely gone, so no real worries, but yeah, kinda sus for a $1,600 headphone. Now finally, comfort. Even though the Arya Stealth are technically heavier, weighing in at 430 grams versus the V2's 404 grams, it's pretty much negligible. They're the same size and shape, and unless you're very particular about it, I doubt you'll notice that either. I'm going to try to keep these on the left side at all times and these on the right side, just so that you can distinguish between the two, by the way. So let's discuss amplification. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy here, and check the impedance and sensitivity levels of each. The Stealth, in fact, are a tad more sensitive and have a little less impedance to them. So I guess I'm perfectly sane. Now on the THX AAA789, I ran the Stealth at 11 on gain 2 in single-ended, and at 1030 on gain 1 in balanced. Now I ran the V2s at 130 on gain 2 in single-ended, 10 on gain 3 in single-ended, at 1 on gain 1 in single-ended, and at 10 on gain 2 in balanced. Now, on the IFI Signature, on the normal gain setting, I ran the V3 at 10 and the V2 at 11. Sound. So once again, the following impressions are through single-ended. The use of balance, the use of the IFI Signature, and other extra sound factors will be discussed in the notes and observations portion of the review. Maybe I should put this out of the way here. Now, without further ado, let's go. Bass. Since these should be relatively close, it should be, in terms of frequency response, I'll start off with an example right off the bat. Zealots of Stockholm by Childish Gambino. So there's really not a massive difference in the bass here. At the minute 35 mark, the V2's bass response seems to be a teensy bit fuller and textured, though both provide a girthy sound. At the 3:05 minute mark, both of these present that note all the way to where it cuts off, then picks up where it should. In terms of forwardness though, I must say, The V2 are ever so slightly forward here. Just a bit more forward, should I say. Though the note on the V2 does sound a tad more discernible. Yep, sure enough, bass guitars, same thing. The V2s simply have a slightly better bass response in terms of texture. Now again, the Stealth are also textured, they just happen to pale in comparison by just a bit. Kick drums. Neither one of these suck at them. The V2 presents speedier, more lightweight kick drums, but they don't bring them as forward as the Stealth. The Stealths are definitely girthier by comparison and come forward just a teensy bit more. Luckily, neither of these have a mid-bass timbre that sounds too B or too warm. So let's pull up The Hammer by Deathclock as an example. The bass guitar and guitar combo here naturally sounds 2B and forward throughout the majority of the track, so any headphone with that forwardness will make the track basically unlistenable. Neither the V3 nor the V2 fall prey to this. Here's the difference though. As a whole, the frequency response on the Stealth is less V-shaped, so listening to this track was far more enjoyable on the Stealth than on the V2s. The V2s, by comparison, kind of make it seem like the low guitars and cymbals are like fighting for your attention, leaving the vocals and other instruments in the dust. Now let's go ahead and jump into mids. Comparatively speaking, the Stealth's female vocal reproduction is a tad more forward, but manages to do so in a less shrill way. Cellos. The Stealth has the more pleasing timbre. It sounds warmer and lush by comparison, much closer to the natural sound of the instrument. The V2, however, have a slightly faster and airier instrument. I think the Stealth do a better job overall here. Instrumental tracks like Tank by the Seatbelts won't really show the V2's weakness here since there's less going on at the time. Once you start introducing lyrics and more congestion into the track though, you'll start to hear that the V2s simply don't have the tonal balance of the Stealth. And I can even throw in a little example here. Throughout most of the track, you can hear the maracas on the left side and some sort of percussive like shaka shaka instrument on the right. In the Stealth, these will be more in line with the rest of the band, while the V2s push them quite a bit forward in comparison. So yeah, far better timbre and better balance between mids and vocals on the Stealth than on the V2s. Treble. Alrighty, so this one's a bit of a sensitive topic for me. If you recall from previous Arya V2 videos, I mentioned that while I admire the V2's high end for its detail retrieval, its forward nature along with HiFiMAN's notorious silvery timbre made for a somewhat painful combination in treble heavy tracks. Well, I come bearing good news. Let's talk sibilants here. Specifically within that consonant region, the V3s are far more tame, which means they're easier to listen to. Upper percussive instruments like cymbals and hi-hats on the V2 are great and detailed, but they really can go overboard sometimes, especially due to the timbre characteristics. On the V3 though, they definitely take a bit of a step down. This results in a sound that's still very energetic, but far easier to listen to. Treble-heavy tracks like Bangarang by Skrillex are still not easy per se to listen to on the Stealth. However, they've tamed up a teensy bit, and now the entire high end of the frequency response sounds a bit flatter and smooth. So yes, full disclosure, I still gotta turn down tracks like Bangarang down around half a notch, but it's still far less necessary. And on the bright side, it's a more enjoyable response. Now let's discuss some sound, stage, and imaging. Let's get real here. Now the V2s are the slightly wider headphone, plain and simple. Both are still moderately wide though. I doubt you'll be disappointed with either of these. Now as far as imaging goes, they're both amazing. They're amazing. But the V2 are just this much more accurate. They simply offer the more precise imaging capabilities. It's true. So to put this a bit more clearly, if the Stealth are really great, the V2 are really great +1. It's a point. Now let's discuss some notes and observations here. This is really unfortunate in my opinion, but the sound of these headphones actually changes depending on what cable you use. And it's just about enough for you to either love them or like them. When it comes to Summit Fi headphones, I can't believe that they would rely on something like a cable to make it sound as ideal as possible, but here we are. So throughout the sound portion of this review, I used a stock single-ended cable that came with the Stealth to review the Stealth, and I used the aftermarket Neo Musica cable that came with my V2s to review the V2s. So let's discuss using different cables on each of these. So starting with the Stealth, running these in XLR just made the sound a little more intense. Honestly, I prefer the timbre of the stock single-ended cable. Now, the Neo Musica cable had less of an effect on the sound, but there is one thing about it I really didn't appreciate. A little increase in the tambourines. And this happens to be near that coin rubbing sound effect in Thunder Horse by Deathclock. It took it from being forward in a pleasing way to being forward in a distracting way. Like this, just stock cable for the win, for better or worse. Now, as for the V2s, by using the Stealth stock cable, the biggest change I noticed is that the soundstage got a little narrower. And still, for some reason, the tambourines got a little annoying. Now, running these in XLR, the sound got a little livelier. This time, though, it was more of an enjoyable change than on the Stealth. Still has the annoying tambourines, though. Finally, you may recall that I've had positive experiences when using the IFI Signature on both the V2 and the Stealth. Let's discuss this quickly. So with the Stealth, you'll recall I mentioned that while X-Bass is a no-go due to it just being overkill, using these normally on the amp is a pretty major improvement. It really helps clean up the high end and makes listening to tracks an easier task altogether. It really does pair well with it. Now, as for the V2s, you may recall my IFI Signature review's title in all caps. Arya owners, pay attention. This had to do with the fact that toggling X-Bass on the V2 led to a bumpin' experience without any sort of muddiness or overkill. Well, I went back to listen to the V2 on it normally to see if I detected another drastic improvement here. Well, I wouldn't say it's drastic, but I do hear a teensy bit more of a roll-off in the high end, which makes treble-heavy tracks a bit more bearable and cleaner. So, still a great combo, just not as drastic of a difference as on the Stealth. Now, to conclude, yeah, look, I think both of these are great headphones. The difference comes into play when considering what your preferred sound is. If you really want that V-shaped disparity between mids and everything else, the V2 are a great deal and can now be found pre-owned at a slightly cheaper price than the newer Stealth pre-owned. However, you know I like that beautiful neutrality. My pick is definitely the Stealth. They really improve upon the V2's weakest areas, the scooped out mids and the sharper treble. And yes, while it's too bad they lose a tad bit of soundstage and imaging capabilities in the process, I personally find that very much worth it. As for how I'll use them, I honestly prefer the stock sound so much, I'd rather suffer with this stupid mediocre cable than stick with my custom XLR. Yeah, so that was a lie. It has now been approximately a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks since I recorded that particular review, and I got pretty used to the freaking XLR cable. Not as used to the sound on the stock cable, but I can't use that stock cable. It's bad. It's mediocre. I don't want to use it. Plain and simple. So I grabbed the XLR and I tried my best to get used to it, and yeah, I got used to it. So yeah. But that is the way she goes. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me. Thank you very much for watching. I really hope this helped your purchasing decision, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, ciao.